Welcome to another edition of Kyle Meredith with. It's the interview series presented by WFPK at WFPK.org, Consequence, and the Consequence Podcast Network. Thanks as always for making your way here, checking out the series. You know what to do. You know how this works. You like what you see, what you hear, hit the subscribe button. I put out 3 new interviews every single week, so it's a great way to keep up with all of your favorite artists. I am so excited today to be talking to the one, the only Dave Holmes.
Hi there, Kyle.
We
meet at last.
We meet at last. It's finally happened. It
finally happened.
This internet nerd flirtation that we've had for weeks is finally
it's finally consummated, and I love it.
Yes. We were talking, of course, before this intro, and it has been kind of funny that I think I'm throwing out some assumptions here. The type of people that we both are, and I'm talking about just these high level music nerd type of people, and in the industry for us both as we've both been. It is kind of amazing actually that this has just never happened. But let me tell you,
strange.
Yeah, that I am so excited to finally meet you actually,
and likewise, I love hearing your voice. I love feeling that there is like a kindred soul out there, and it's great to finally connect.
Yes, well, like a lot of folks in our generation, you were a bit of a guiding light for me as well in the MTV days. I mean, that's awesome. Obviously when I became aware of what you were doing. But it was like, oh, here's someone like me. Here's someone that I can, and it's been so great following you since then too. I mean, let's throw out a few of the things that's been going on. You put out a book a few years ago.
I did. Yeah. Party of One, right. A memoir in 21 songs. It was it was a book that was sort of putting itself together as a collection of essays for a long time. And then, I finally found the right editor who like whipped me into shape. And that came out about 5 years ago. Actually.
Yeah, right. You've been doing that. You've got the Esquire stuff. You're writing for Esquire.
Yeah, I'm on staff at Esquire, which is a lot of fun.
Yeah, those articles are so good.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It's really wild. I got very lucky in that I was doing a column for Vulture for a while, and my editor on that moved to Esquire and was just like, "Do you want to come along?" And I like, that is a magazine that like shaped my sense of humor. Like those Dubious Achievement Awards issues, and later with AJ Jacobs, and like they just had like they were a critical magazine in my life, and it's crazy to be there.
Yeah. And that's something though, when it finally happens, when you're like, oh, I'm at the place. I'm at the place.
Yeah. It's real weird. And it's like, I don't know that I had ever, like when I went into the office for the first time 5-6 years ago, and I was surrounded by, I was 40 something, and surrounded by all these like brilliant 30-year-olds. And I was like, oh, this is going to be, you just assume media people are going to be vicious. And a lot of them are. Right. But the team at Esquire happens to be really like kind and supportive and smart and all the things that you want them to be.
It's exactly what you want it to be. Yeah.
Yeah.
That good environment. And then there's the other side, of course, the podcast side, and that's one of the main reasons that we're here today. You've got a few leading up to what we're getting to the point here with Homophily. You did one with our mutual friend Mike Doty, or maybe that one's still going on.
It is still going on. So that show is called True Story, because Mike Doty and I, first of all, we were like, we were neighbors back in the East Village in like the late 90s. And we met through mutual friends and became friendly ourselves, and we're both obsessed with the real world. And so we did like a real world rewatch of season 1, and like did it episode by episode, and then got busy and had to break. And then we came back together to do another season around the London season, which I believe is season 4 of the real world. And then just like things got crazy busy for the both of us. He started recording. I sold this other, waiting for impact, and things just got like so busy that we didn't have time to like watch the episodes, much less talk about them. So we were kind of just like we forget that people are listening is the thing. Like we put them out there just because it's kind of fun, and it's like, and when we check, it's like, oh yeah, people are listening, but it's like it's terrible to say, but it's like we just forget that there's like that we might have created a thing that people might want more of. So we just sort of stopped and we're like, oh, we'll get back to it when we can. And then there were like rumors on Twitter that we were feuding, and that's too good to dispel. You know what I mean? Like, I don't mind the world thinking that Mike Doty and I are beefing, but we're not beefing. We will make new episodes. It's just a matter of finding the time.
I can't wait for that Ghost of Room track. That's a total diss track to Dave Holmes.
Oh my God, that's the dream.
That's a dream.
Like in the soul coughing days. So I had I mentioned on air that I was like trying to learn guitar, probably back in like 99 or something. And so like a viewer had guitar picks made with my face on them.
Wow.
And sent them to the studio, but like 1,000 of them. And I was like, this is such a lovely gift that I cannot use. You know what I mean? Like, it was too much.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it was so nice, like almost too nice. So I kept a bunch, and Mike Doty was like, can I use these and throw them out at soul coughing concerts? And I was like, yes, of course you can. Yes, of course you can. So I'm sure there are some very confused 1999 soul coughing concert goers.
What the hell?
Yeah. Why? But yeah, that's actually kind of the perfect use of a guitar pick with your face on it.
Tracks pretty well with something Mike would want to do anyway. Just,
absolutely.
The idea, right?
Yes.
I love
absolutely.
that. I do love it. So you mentioned it, and that's what the latest thing is. It's Waiting for Impact. So this is a podcast that came out in the fall. Was it the fall, late summer, somewhere? I lost track of time, but yeah,
around October of last year. It's a 10-episode show, kind of in the true crime vein. In which I investigate a pop culture mystery that has bedeviled me for decades, which is, and I say this to you in the form of a question, knowing the answer. You remember the Motownphilly video by Boyz II Men, right?
Yes,
of course. So you know how that's kind of that's a bit of a marketing exercise for Michael Bivins' East Coast family. Right. So it's like it's introducing the acts that he has signed to his label under Motown, which are Boyz II Men and Another Bad Creation, who had Aisha and Playground, which I'm sure you remember from around 91. Mm-hmm. And then about 2.5 minutes into the video, for 3 seconds against a black background, there is this like group of 5 guys in matching white shirts and each in a different necktie. And Sudden Impact is their name. And it's literally in lights over their heads. And they look at the camera and they point at the camera, like super bold, like get ready for sudden impact. And then that's, as far as I knew, the only thing that they ever actually did. And I had always in the back of my mind been like, that is a story to pursue in some medium or another. And podcastery just ended up being the perfect venue.
And it's funny because you do paint it, like you said, as true crime, because you ended up on the Just Right, or what, I'm sorry, what's the network called?
Right.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Which, I have a wife who's in her mid to late 30s, and so she's a very big fan of what's going on over there. So
good,
of course,
yeah.
She had I think tipped me off even before I'd seen it on the web. So like, hey, look, Dave Holmes is going to do this thing, and it's set in the early 90s, and it's about and it sort of does it well. Talk about that actually a little bit, because it's not just, I guess it becomes, the destination is not what you thought it would be. And that happens a lot of time with the greatest of podcasts too, especially with the murder mysteries. It's always not exactly what you think it's going to be. But while you are trying to figure out what happened to this group, it does become about so much more. And I think that's what inspired me to listen.
Oh, good. Yeah, that's the thing, is that the story itself, I'm curious about, because obviously something happens. I've been adjacent to the music industry for long enough to know that some things work out and some things don't. And it doesn't come down to talent or merit or work ethic or whatever. It's just like things fall through the cracks, or there's a difference of opinion or whatever. And so I was just like, something interesting happened there, I bet. But it's also, to me, it's like the overall thing of you could look at this group as a failure because you don't know what happened, or you could be curious about what did, and celebrate what did, and look at the parts of your own life where you're like, my career doesn't measure up to, you know, person X's career, or like I set out to do this thing and now I'm doing this complete other thing. Like we all change course and we all like drop the ball and we all, you know, pick up new things that we didn't expect to and whatever. This is a strange life, and you know, entertainment is a capricious business. And so I always felt like it would touch on larger themes of like what life is all about and what success is all about. And also like how our lives are so completely different now than they were in the 1990s. These guys were kind of the last group to rise and fall before the internet. So they didn't leave a trace. Right. You know, there's not like a broken like GeoCities link to their fan site or whatever. It's just, they were just gone. Yeah. So there was a lot to get into, and then on top of it, the story of what actually did happen turns out to be really interesting too.
Yeah, there's I think there's a lot of points that you just said that I think drew me in, but it's one of those last ones too that was the curiosity part. I don't want to say the novelty part because I don't want to paint it that way, but around this time that the podcast started, in the few months leading up to it, I'd been doing an internet archive project. Launch CD-ROM, Launch Magazine CD-ROM, and Blender Magazine CD-ROM. Wow. I had collected every one that I possibly could, which is to say that there is one from each series that I have yet to find. But it in a similar way, they had existed while the internet was going on. I mean, just as it was beginning, but because they both folded in this time before YouTube, not long enough to become cool again, you know, to become collectors, just at a time, you know, because you have that natural cycle of things where now it's just lame and passe or whatever. But so most of them had never been archived. And so I had been in this archival project for about 9 months in my spare time. It was my hobby. It was my hobby project. Of just collecting these and putting them up, you know, video by video, interview by interview, you know, onto YouTube and everything. And then to kind of stumble on to what you were doing with this, I mean, again, I was like, oh, right, in that same way, because there's a line in pop culture history. There are lines all throughout pop culture history, and this one is that. It's like you get something that happens right before something, and then and I wasn't. The point didn't mean what it meant to you. I didn't remember the point. I obviously had to go back to find, like, who is he talking about, you know? Okay, good. You know, I think you and I are similar in that we like grew up with and now crave that which is scarce. You know, now we're now in a time when you can get literally anything. And there are like 5 things I'm still looking for. And I'm obsessed with the idea that they're still out there. And like if like Linus looking for the most sincere pumpkin patch, if I find like just the right used record store, I will stumble upon that Tommy Keane's Strange Alliance album that there's 100 copies of in the world, and maybe they won't know what they have and they'll give it to me for $2 or whatever. You know, or I'll find like, you know, the whole late 90s run of CMJ magazine with the CDs intact. You know, I just bought an entire lot of those. Did you? Right behind this computer. How did I have know? A stack. How did I know? That I just arrived in the mail, like, I don't know, a week ago. How did I know? Oh my God. Like who's on those covers? We're thinking we gotta have a PJ Harvey probably. Oh, do you want me to go grab this stack? Yes, Kyle. Hang on. I've got to get this stack. We at least got to flip through this a second. So talk amongst yourselves. Okay. Just to give the reader a flavor, he is getting up and he is going to the other side of his office. I thought better of this, and I thought to myself, I should have these over here because for some reason I feel like these could play a part of the conversation. Well, I mean, you had to know. But the thing is, I mean, like it's, you know, I'm looking for that thing that I can't find, and it's like that keeps a collector and an obsessive alive and engaged throughout middle age. So this is I just bought this stack. There we go. I'm going to tell you, listener, it's a stack and a half. Yeah, so we got
Hatfield,
Juliana Hatfield, Soul Asylum
Soul
here,
Asylum.
Flaming Lips,
Oh God,
Rockets
yes.
from the Crypt.
Oh,
There's the Presidents, Blue there,
Presidents United.
Iggy Pop. Yeah, we got that.
I 100% had all of these.
Right.
I
and
had
it
a subscription at this time in my life.
Yeah,
living with a bunch of friends on 67th Street.
It just keeps going. This was an honest Bible for me, you know, because
sure.
Yeah, again, you know, I was rural Kentucky, and radio, it was country and pop radio. So I knew the pop songs and I knew the country songs, and
sure.
And maybe, you know, because of what Top 40 was back then, you would get a good slice of alternative, which was which was just beautiful. You and I were talking about that over Twitter, and it was amazing at the time what was allowed to be top 40, and because it was the last time that rock had such a presence on the charts, in the mainstream charts, and what was going on there, and you know, when I just want to have some fun on a Saturday night, and I look through old radio charts online and just pick a random year, and I was saying
you don't know what you just did in my heart. You don't know, Kyle.
Yeah,
that's how I know I'm talking to a friend.
Right. You just dig it. You know, I dig into the Gavins and the R&Rs and the CMJs when they finally arrive. But and I said, I think the most surprising one was when I was looking at it and was like, the Jayhawks were the top. They were on pop stations. Like yeah, okay, so we know the cultural impact of bands like Nirvana, etc. And so that one's not so far-fetched, because that was just such a mega thing that they had to play on. But I was like, man, you even had these bands on there. You know, it's like alternative was so like, everybody has to have it. We're going to create an entire format out of this, that the top 40 was like, we'll take anybody and everybody. And I was like, wow, even the Jayhawks, who, you know, great band. I like the Jayhawks and everything, but it was like, that was actually surprising to see.
It is, but it's also like pop music has been weird, and like not in like experimental weird, but just in the sense of like, you know, you look back at like 1988 and teenagers were listening to like Don Henley and Steve Winwood. That's weird.
That is weird. Right.
That's weird that a teenager, it's weird that like in 1983, 12-year-old me would rush to the mall to get Synchronicity, like a Police album based on, you know, an obscure psychotherapeutic theory. Like that's weird. Like music's been weird. So, you know, after Nirvana, there were those few years where it was just like, it was just like, are you it? Are you it? Are you it? Like, it was just anybody had a chance, because, you know, the fact that Nirvana broke through was very strange and unexpected.
Right.
So so it could be the Jayhawks.
So I'll actually bring it back around a minute to Waiting for Impact, the podcast.
Yes.
One of my favorite parts in it, as we're talking about this nerdery, as we're getting at, is you had a guest on. I apologize, I've forgotten his name. But he was talking about Nielsen and charting and how it changed.
Yeah.
And I had never even looking through, you know, even as I spend my time in a very antisocial way in these moments, alone in my charts, it had not occurred to me. I had never read it like that's what changed top 40 radio in this way. And for you listeners who are hanging on to every word of this conversation, go on, because this is a moment.
It's really interesting. Yeah, it's Chris Melanthi, who hosts the Hit Parade podcast and writes about the charts for Slate and whatnot, and like he is next level like chart nerd, and I mean that in only the most complimentary of ways. But so he gets into in 1991. So up until 1991, Billboard magazine, the magazine that does the charts, their top 40 singles are the ones that Casey Kasem is quoting and reading from on American Top 40. Theirs is like the gold standard album chart. But up until 1991, they had been compiled by like people from the magazine calling radio stations and record stores and being like, what are you selling? What are you playing? So they're like, those people didn't have to tell the truth. It wasn't like under oath or anything. It was just kind of like, what's your top 30? And so they would say it. And it was, you know, though we can't prove that it was super fraudulent, it was certainly vulnerable to a lack of honesty.
Right.
And so that might be why the in the late 80s and early 90s, like, Steve Winwood's and people of that nature could have like hit songs, because that's, the old white guys who were running things, like that's what they were comfy with, so they could kind of overrepresent them. They then in 1991 went to Soundscan, which was a little scanner thing at the counter of the record store, and for radio stations it was like a Shazam type piece of software that literally listened to every radio station and said accurately what they were playing. And then it was just like the charts went from what older white guys wanted them to be to what they actually were. And Nirvana blew up and hip hop blew up, and it suddenly, like, the charts reflected what America was actually listening to and buying and interested in. And that was a huge change. It was less vulnerable to people kind of steering it. It was like, yeah.
And it would define the decade.
Culture changed.
Right.
It really would.
Yeah, and I think maybe the biggest musically in a way that we don't look at it. And that's, I mean, it's sort of an interesting thing too. What, I kept thinking about while I was listening to your podcast is it's something I've thought about a lot as I'm just looking back in time, is you have the perceived version of what an era was like, because after a lot of time, various things inevitably get left behind, on and on and on, until finally you just kind of have a very small picture of what a moment was like. Right. When you're digging in this, this is a moment that, was an important time in your life anyway. This is a coming of age years right here. So I'm sure it's fresh, but at the same time, digging into these stories with everybody, do you start to, find those moments where you're like, oh, this was the real early 90s? And because like any era, and I'll say this, the early 90s that we usually think of is so much more complex than what it actually was. Did that happen for you in this? For sure. Yeah. I mean, I certainly, we remember Nirvana, right? And we think that it was just like they happened and then pop just ended, right? Like fell off a cliff right there. And it really didn't. I mean, like, pop music continued to be like fluffy and fun. And even before Backstreet Boys and NSYNC made the scene, there were all these other sort of boy band-esque groups like Soul for Real and and certainly like, Boyz II Men, became huge. Like that world continued. It's funny that you mentioned this, because I was just writing about like the way that we remember decades. Like, if you get invited to an 80s party, it's like, what everybody's going to look like. And it's nothing like people actually looked in the 80s. It's like certain people in 80s movies looked, but it's not how the 80s looked. And when that period detail gets done right, it's like thrilling. Because I'll only interrupt you real quick to say there's a joke, an online joke that somebody said the real 80s was just wood paneling, just left over from the 70s. Everything was brown. Yes. And that like plaid carpet that you would put over the cement floor of an unfinished basement to like make it the kids' room. Yeah. Right. So I was actually just in the unfinished part of my parents' basement, clearing it out as my mom was moving. And I found a bunch of old vinyl, and that old vinyl included, and I'm going to go around my desk and find it. All right. But some old K-tel records that the family owned in the 70s and 80s. So hold on one sec. If you got your CMJ, I'm going to have my fantastic from 1973 and Bright Side of Music, also from 1973. Oh man. So like, so we think of the 70s as like, sludgy and bell-bottomy and whatever. But here we got The Morning After by Maureen McGovern. We got The 12th of Never by Donny Osmond. Like, this is the 70s. Right. And just this kind of strange, eclectic, raspberries, sweet, it's we think of disco and Led Zeppelin, but it was the 70s were complicated. It had everything, and it was complicated. No, that's really interesting. So that's again one of the things that just stood out as you dove into this, and I want to hit a few points here. I'm just going to go down some lists actually, because so this gets inspired, the whole and again, we're talking about Winning for Impact. The podcast gets inspired because of a music video.
Right.
I was recently talking with Shirley Manson, who I've had on the show quite a few times. I'm a massive Garbage fan, right?
Yes.
And I started thinking about, because we were talking about one of the older albums. It was an anniversary of Beautiful Garbage, and the world that they created in their music videos. And the music videos were such a world that it didn't matter how normal and average you were, because everybody is to a certain degree, but in this scape. So, and for you to have latched onto this, to latched onto this music video, and here they are, and they're doing the points, and for what that world built up. You've been in the business long enough to know what's real behind the camera at this point, but still, when you dove in, did you find when you started meeting this group, I imagine in this similar way that we're doing right now, did it take any of that magic away from the world that was created in that music video?
Not at all. Not at all. And if anything, it enhanced it, because these were, these are guys who were, roughly my age, maybe a year or two younger, who were, high school kids when this was all going on. And, the way in which they caught Michael Bivins' eye is a really interesting story. The way that they became one of the first acts that he signed is super interesting. And then they, literally just from being regular high school kids, were kind of thrust into this world. And they continue to be so starstruck by it, they're not to spoil too much, but even though the thing didn't work out, they're all still so psyched that it happened. And they feel it feels like they're really grateful that that they got the opportunity, even though it didn't work out. And that's to experience their enthusiasm around it is the 90s monoculture pop music world was really exciting. And to be plucked out of your regular life and dropped into the middle of it as they were, and as I was that is really exciting. That's we're lucky. We're lucky.
Yeah. I never thought I would say this back then, but I miss the monoculture. I do.
Me too. Me too. Yeah. I mean, yeah. The idea of being able to get your arms around all of it is a thing that we really took for granted.
Yeah.
You might not I am considered somebody who knows a lot about music because I came up in a time when it was kind of easy to know a lot about music, because there was the mainstream and then there was the little tiny sort of creek that ran alongside it that that gave us the Replacements and the Cure and the Smiths and all the things that the weird kids loved. Still a multi-million-dollar marketing department that got it from the recording studio to our ears. But it was there were just a couple major sources from which music came, and so you could kind of know all of it. Now there are 100,000, and nobody of any age knows everything that is new and exciting. And that's, I don't know, it's weird. It's hard. I mean, I'm sure it's still good for kids and stuff, but as an adult, it feels chaotic.
Yeah. So for you, do you nowadays?
Yes.
Do you find, and maybe there's no answer for this, by the way, I understand it's one of those questions. Do you find that it's more exciting to discover something new, or do you find for yourself it's more exciting to discover something lost?
Ooh, boy. Oh, wow. That's a good question. And kind of both. I definitely love excavating something that I've just never heard of that happened in my life time. I just, and when I say got into, please put quotation marks around got into, because there are literally two songs, but there is a French artist from 1983 called Bibi Flash. And one of her songs was playing in the lobby of the Ace Hotel, which of course it was when I was in New York, somehow not getting COVID a couple of weeks ago. And I Shazammed it and I was like, this is a great song. And I researched, and literally it's two, maybe three, her greatest hits is 3 songs and then remixes. but it's like, what a moment
Right.
of like French fashion from 1983. Like, that's fascinating. I'm curious where she is now, and all of that. And then, yeah, on those rare occasions when there's like a new young artist that I can like appreciate and get into at age 50, that definitely, it feels like I'm one step ahead of the Grim Reaper when that happens, and
Right.
that's exciting. And then there's the thing in between, which is like, um the Hold Steady and LCD Sound System and Frank Turner and all of these things that sort of are meant to, I mean, I don't want to like make them sound like, legacy vintage artists or whatever, but they do kind of play to a 40-year-old man's sensibility
Mhm.
in a way. You go to a Hold Steady concert and it's a bunch of people around your age, drinking too much and jumping up and down, and it's like,
Right.
this is exciting. I don't think my older brothers had this. I know my parents didn't have it. But yeah, I don't know. It's both.
Yeah. Yeah. That's speaking of new tracks, you turned me on to is Jake Wesley Rogers. Am I remembering that right?
Yes.
Oh
Yeah.
man, what some good songs that
Woo.
yeah.
Yeah, he's amazing. Yeah, I saw him. It was my first show back at the Troubadour in maybe October-ish. He had written a song with my friend Curtis Peoples, who has been a solo artist. He's in a group called Kids in America now. And that song, the audience like knew and connected to and like freaked out over. Like, I think it was partially none of us had been together inside the Troubadour in a long time. It was partially that it was, very queer and very poppy, but it was just, I've never seen a more enthusiastic audience. And
Yeah.
that was exciting.
What's something new? Throughout Waiting for Impact, you also reintroduce some artists that
Mm-hmm.
weren't exactly lost, but definitely not thought about as much.
Mm-hmm.
It was weird. I'm now actually remembering there was a weird set of coincidences that was happening as I was listening to this,
Mm-hmm.
to your podcast, that at one point I just pulled out, behind me, there's CDs and all that.
Oh my God. This is
Yeah,
this is
there
my
was
dream office.
yeah, I just pulled out a Dog's Eye View CD the day
All
before.
right.
You have the guy from Dog's Eye View on
Yeah.
the podcast, and you have
Yeah.
one of the guys from CNC Music Factory. Is that
Mm-hmm.
right? Yeah,
Freedom Williams, the
and
rapper.
yeah, right. And so that's the other side of all of this, and other guests. And again, I won't give everyone away because there are really some delightful surprises as you go
Good. Thank
throughout
you.
this.
Thank
But
you.
but yeah, it's the other part of this, you have this act that sort of never was, in a
Mm-hmm.
sense,
Mm-hmm.
but you have also these acts that was and had a moment and had and
Yeah.
tasted it, just tasted it.
Yes.
And for that part of the story, how celebratory and frustrating that is at the same time.
Sure. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, it can be, but there's also the thing of like, sometimes you get to the top of the mountain and you don't like the view there.
Hmm.
Like sometimes you do put in all of the work and you get to where you thought you wanted to go, and it's not satisfying, and you can either keep pounding your head against that wall, or you can say like, I'm gonna try something new. And so, yeah, so Peter, that is what Peter Stewart did. He got what he wanted, and it didn't fix him the way that he thought that it would. And so he started doing a lot of thinking about, what he was going to do next. And that to me is really interesting.
Yeah.
I hate the cultural thing that we do to people who were briefly famous and aren't anymore, where it's like we call them has-beens or
Hmm.
also rans or whatever. And it's like, well, no, the reality is much more complicated than that. Like sometimes you do grab the brass ring and it's like, okay, this isn't what I wanted. And, you go and you try something new, and that's success, I think.
Yeah. I mean, hell, some of my favorite albums are the ones after the fame, long after the spotlight.
Absolutely.
Because a lot of these musicians, some of them do hang it up and they find different jobs or whatever they need to do.
Yeah.
Some of them, a lot of them keep making music, and it's so much further under the radar, and they just make fantastic music.
Yes.
But hardcore fans will hear it, and that's it, and that's all they need.
And it's like it's music that is made because they're like, because I want to play music.
Mm-hmm.
And not because like I want to have a hit record and I have a record label, giving me notes or whatever it is after the fact. And it is often released independently or by themselves or put on SoundCloud or whatever, but it's music that is made because they have the need to make music. And that's really interesting.
Yeah. So what you call Waiting for Impact, it's also called a Dave Holmes passion project. I would say the parenthetical title of it.
The subhead.
The subhead, right?
Yeah.
So your story, whether natural or you knew it was happening, gets weaved in here as well. What's that part of yours? Because you got to the top of the mountain, as far as a lot of us are concerned. I mean, MTV in the 90s, was a mountain. There are lots of mountains, right?
There are a lot of mountains, but yeah, no, that was my dream job too. There's no doubt about that. Like growing up, I was like, I sat in front of the TV as though it was going to like open up and let me in, and it eventually did, kind of. And that is so exciting, like to have been like now that the 13-year-olds who were glued to MTV in 1998, 99, 2000 are like adults. To like when someone will come up and say hello to me and like talk about how glued they were to that moment. It's like I had my moment in 1983 when it was in 83, 84, when it was, Madonna and Van Halen and Prince and all that stuff. And like MTV was so much a part of that for me. And so to know that I am that for someone else is just cool. Like that just makes me happy. And then, so, you get maybe 5 years if you're lucky there. And that's around what I got. And then I started, I continued working in TV and did, a bunch of shows across a bunch of cable channels and got to a point where I was like, I don't love this. Like I still do some TV stuff on occasion. But I found that I was doing stuff where I was just reading a teleprompter. And if they replaced me with someone else, the show would be exactly the same. And I got really spoiled being at MTV, where it was mostly live, and it was like I felt at the end of every show like that only I could have done. Not that I was like the best in the world at doing it, but like if someone else did it, it would be a different show. I got to really put my stamp on it, and you don't get to do that all the time. So I kind of I took my foot off the gas when it came to like, pursuing TV hosting work and focused more on writing. And I'm, it's way less lucrative, but I'm way happier. And I kind of get to do what I want, which is exciting, and I am able to pitch ideas like Waiting for Impact to people like Karen Kilgariff and Georgia Hardstark and spend the better part of a year doing them. That's really fun. That's really fun.
And there's all these emotional, inspirational moments in this. I mean, God, I know I messaged you immediately after one specific episode. And for those who are going to be listening to it, I don't want to ruin that moment because it builds. I'll only say there's a Counting Crows moment.
Okay, good. Good.
Because it's what we're both talking about. We're both in our careers, and every day, regardless of if you're on the upslope or the downslope, there's still a question mark at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
Maybe it's not a question mark you need to even look at or mess with. Maybe you can put that question mark off for years if you need to, but it's there. It's always there. And when I was listening to this, I just happened to be in one of those days where that question mark was looking me right in the face.
Oh, yeah.
Like, do we open the box today? Do we open the box today? Because like you, I've been able to realize a lot of my dreams. Thank God for this podcast because I get to meet my heroes all the time. And it's sort of on my own terms. And I found some great partners to go along with it. And then I got to taste the TV thing. And it's like, okay, well, that's there. And what is success was a question that I kept asking myself. What is success? I hit 40 this past year, and that's naturally just one of those moments, I guess, where you start, going inside. I'm not building up to a question. I'm only building up to say your podcast was so perfectly written, not just for the music nerd in me. And it could have only been for that. And I would have been just as happy, but for the rocks you turned over with Waiting for Impact was so vital to all the words that I think I needed to hear.
Oh man, I'm literally about to cry. Thank you for that. And I that is truly what I was hoping for. You know, like I of course wanted to find out what the story of this group was, but I also wanted to start exploring those questions for myself and kind of start a conversation about that for listeners also. And so that makes me very, very happy. And that is in fact why I gave it the subtitle A Dave Holmes Passion Project, because in the early like weeks of writing the scripts and like, you know, and trying to find the guys and doing the interviews and all that, I had that moment of like, well, Dave, you have finally found the thing that nobody could possibly care about. Like you have reached the end of what you do. And, you know, because it is such a specific thing and it is kind of esoteric. But I reminded myself that like the themes of the show are interesting, and I am the kind of person who is passionate about this stuff. And I am where I am because I'm the kind of person who's passionate about this kind of stuff. And it's good that I'm passionate, and I should have to remind myself that I'm passionate about it. So I gave it that subtitle so that while writing scripts, I had to keep writing those words. And then when I was recording them, I had to keep saying them. And it was like a form of self-hypnosis, so that it was like, keep going, just keep going. And you will get to something that is interesting and that makes the story compelling to other people and makes them think about their own lives. Like if you just keep going. So just keep going is the thing. Just keep going is the thing. Like just whatever, obviously we all have our question marks and whatever, but like some questions are not answerable in the moment. And if you just keep going with what you do best and what you love and what you're passionate about, you're going to get to something that you don't even know what it is yet, but that is interesting and fulfilling and maybe allows you to live and, you know, pay rent.
Right. I mean, it's perfectly said. I was rewatching some episodes of Newsroom, the show that was on HBO, the Sorkin.
Yeah.
I was rewatching a bit of the first season a few weeks ago, and it's one of the last lines of the first couple episodes, and his boss, fellow with the bow tie, he I'm great with names, as you can see. Bow tie man. He says, you know, when all the greats went to make you know, the best news show ever, basically saying when all these people wanted to be successful, they decided to. They made a decision that today this is what I'm going to be. I'm only kind of furthering the point that you just made, that it is the moving forward and it is the pushing. And
it's, you know, I didn't know what a podcast was 12 years ago. You know, Chris Malamphy, who was this chart obsessive, didn't know that there would be a slate for him to write for when he was in college, like obsessively poring over every word of Billboard. You know, you didn't know that like Kyle Meredith with could be a thing that you could do as often as you wanted to, for as long as you wanted to, when you were, you know, reading your CMJs in the 1990s. There's something, if we all just keep doing what we're lit up to do, we're gonna get somewhere great. And that you know, will be a light that some younger version of ourselves will see, that will like keep them moving forward.
Yep. I love it. It's such a well done series.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Will there be more?
Well, maybe. There are a couple different things. I have a concept for season 2 that is not, it's not music based exactly, but that is sort of in the broader world of pop culture. That's also just a strange small story that I've always had in the back of my mind, that it might be fun to investigate. But also, you know, sure. Well, I'll just say, like, the guys are speaking again for the first time in a couple decades, and recording together. And so it is possible that there might be actual music from this group who we never heard a note from.
Wow.
At some point, maybe 30 years after the fact. So as that process continues to unfold, it's possible that I will be checking in with them. There are also some people who are central to the story who I never did get a chance to talk to, who maybe now that the whole thing is out and they know what it is, might agree to speak with me, but we'll see.
Yeah.
But yeah, as of right now, it is a 10-episode show, and all 10 episodes are up. You can binge it if that's your thing. You do it once a week. Listen, I'm not your boss. You do what you like.
Well, you certainly controlled my life there for at least the few weeks that I was listening to that.
Awesome. That makes me very, very happy.
Yeah.
That makes me so happy.
Yeah. It's beautifully done. Waiting for Impact. It's out there on all the streamers. Everybody go check it out. Especially if you're in the music nerd world, you're going to love this. But if you just need a good shot of inspirational caffeine for the day, it's there for you too.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And Kyle, I'm just I've been building a song a day playlist for 2022. We're on day 4.
Right.
What is a song that you are listening to? It doesn't have to be new.
Yeah.
Just what's on your mind right now?
Yeah.
You get slot number 4.
Luckily, because of me being a music director at a radio station as well, I get to be forced into keeping up with new music, which I would do anyway, right. But it keeps me on it. There is a duo in Nashville. I think they're in Nashville. They're called Twen, but it's Twen.
Twen.
Yeah, and it's a song called "Ha Ha Home." It's all one word, home. Ha Ha Home.
Okay.
And yeah, it's got me pretty deep right now, grabbing me.
Wow.
So that's
okay.
Yeah, that's
I trust your I trust your ear.
Yeah,
it's going on. It's track 4.
Yeah, check it out.
We're building a year.
All right, Dave, thank you so much.
Kyle, thank you.
This has been fun.
It has been fun.
All right.